Hello, my name is Miranda and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about all the books I read in July. It feels like about 5 minutes ago that I was talking about all the books I read in June. July was actually a really good reading month for me. Pretty much all the books I read were excellent and I really enjoyed them. Also, before I start, Booker long list was announced a couple of days ago as I'm filming this, and I don't know if I'll succumb to FOMO and end up reading the long list. Right now I'm feeling like probably not, but we'll see. If there are any books from the long list that you think are really good, or that you think I'd like in particular, you know, then please do let me know, because I haven't properly looked at all of them and figured out if there's any on there that I really want to read. But I think for August I'm mostly going to be focusing on Women in Translation month, which I love reading books by women in translation. So yeah, I'm going to be focusing on that, and possibly maybe some Booker books if any start speaking to me. Right now they're not. Could all change, who knows. So the first two books that I read in July I kind of mentioned at the end of my June wrap up, because I read the second two books in the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne, Collins, Catching Fire and Mockingjay. I read them at the beginning of July and I read the Hunger Games at the end of June. They're just great reads, so that was fun. I read Mrs. S by Kay Patrick. This came out at the beginning of June, and this is a proof copy that I got from work. Thank you very much, Fourth Estate. You didn't give it to me in particular, but thank you. This is about a young Australian woman / person. Gender is complicated in this book, but I think I'll go for woman. That moves to the UK to work at a kind of very fancy elite boarding school for girls. Her job is kind of not very well defined. She just sort of does some stuff around, like, kind of helping people, and this kind of makes her, you know, she's very bored a lot of the time. She doesn't quite know what she's doing, but what she does find is the beginning of an obsession with the headmaster's wife, who is Mrs. S, and this then develops. I enjoyed this. I think the writing is really beautiful in places, and well, consistently it's very beautiful and very evocative, and some of the kind of, like, you know, the thoughts and feelings and the yearning, I felt so hard. There's also some very interesting observations about gender, and I mentioned that the main character's gender is kind of fluid and not defined. You know, she calls herself a lesbian but never specifies being a woman or what pronouns they want to use, and also wears a binder and has kind of a sort of aversion to being perceived as feminine, that I really related to without wanting to get too personal. But there are some lines in here about how the narrator kind of sees themselves / herself that I found to be really powerful, and, you know, spoke to some very specific feelings that I've had. So that was really cool, to kind of feel, you know, sort of represented in that way. That was nice. The only thing that didn't quite work for me was the fact that there are no speech marks in this book, but there are also no line breaks to indicate at all if somebody is speaking or if it's like an inner thought. So a lot of the time you don't know whether someone is speaking at all, who is speaking, or when someone stops speaking and another character starts speaking, which is a bit confusing, but sometimes it kind of works. It kind of feels like a rhythm. Sometimes it just annoyed me, but you know, that's a personal thing. For some people I'm sure it would work really well, some people less so. So just, you know, bear that in mind. I also didn't love the ending. I understood why it happened like it did, but it felt very anticlimactic and kind of a bit rushed and a bit kind of like lazy to me. Like it just, it kind of felt like the writer was enjoying all of the stuff that was happening, and then was like, oh, how do I end this? Oh, I guess this is the kind of the only way I can end it. Guess I'll just end it, and then it just ended. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but it was a mixed bag, basically. But I would recommend it if you want a beautiful book about a queer relationship, and kind of not really binary identity in terms of gender specifically. That makes sense? I don't know. Then I listened to the audiobook of A Passage North by Anuk Arudpragasam, which was longlisted for the Booker Prize in 2021, I think. I'm not really sure what like pushed me to pick this up, or, you know, start listening to it. There wasn't anything in particular, I just felt like it, and I really, really loved it. So A Passage North is about a young man who lives in Sri Lanka with his mother and grandmother. His grandmother is kind of ill / just aging, and is kind of declining. And the book sort of starts where this young man finds out that a woman that they hired to look after his grandmother, who then left and went back to her home for reasons that they don't know about or don't understand, she has suddenly died in quite an unusual way. So he then has to travel north to go to the funeral of this woman who used to look after his grandmother, but was more of a kind of companion to her, in terms of, instead of being like a carer. Now, most of this book is like just the main character's thoughts, and a lot of the time the thoughts are quite like meandering, and he goes on a lot of tangents inside his, you know, his thoughts, and those tangents include like his grandmother's health and kind of reflections on aging and dying, the mental health of the woman who looked after / was a companion for his grandmother, his own past relationship that he, you know, felt very unsettled but ultimately kind of fulfilled in, the history of Sri Lanka and the Sri Lankan War, which the you know, the woman whose funeral he is going to, her history is very much like tied up in that of the Sri Lankan Civil War, and then just generally like random philosophical musings and thoughts that he has. And I just really enjoyed being inside this character's head and going down all these different paths, and exploring so many different thoughts and concepts. The writing is just so beautiful, and the book made me have several existential crises as I was listening to it. Some parts of it were maybe a bit like on the nose, and sometimes the philosophical musings are in a similar way kind of just like thrown at you, like it's not entirely clear like, oh, this is what the character was thinking, and, you know, or if it's just the author telling you about like what he thinks about the state of the world. I don't know, I think there are some valid criticisms that you could make of this book, I'm sure have been made, but I just felt so kind of like sucked in to it, and I just really enjoyed being in its little world, you know, the world of this character and his family, and then all of the kind of wider things that come from thinking about the character and his family, and the things it had to say about like mental health, grief, aging, just felt very special to me. I don't know, it was just really impactful and I really loved it. Then I read There There by Tommy Orange. This is about a collection of mostly Native American people who are preparing to go to a powwow in Oakland in California, and you switch from character to character, you know, getting a bit about their life and their perspective, and why they're going to this powwow, what has kind of led them up to this point, as well as in between there are some interludes about like Native American life more generally, and most of the characters are kind of linked together in some way, in a kind of chain, and you sort of switch in between them. I really loved this. I thought it was incredibly like tense and beautifully written, and also just very insightful into so many different people's lives and how different circumstances can lead people into different situations, and yeah, there's just so much interesting stuff in here. I'm really annoyed at myself because I read the first half of this pretty quickly, like kind of in a couple of days, and then I slowed down a lot, and that really impacted my enjoyment of it because I kept kind of forgetting not who the characters were, but like where they had been previously and what had happened to them previously. So by the end, I was kind of a bit more detached from the whole thing than I should have been. So I would recommend, if you're going to read this, not doing that. Read it in as close to one sitting as you possibly can, or in a shorter space of time as you can, or read it in long chunks, I think, because that really did impact my enjoyment of it. However, I still think it's a brilliant book, and I would really highly recommend it. What I learned from July was that audiobooks are my saving grace a lot of the time, because I read 7 books, and 5 of them were audiobooks. So the last 2 audiobooks, the first one was Carla by Colin Walsh. This was amazing. I loved this, and I would highly recommend the audiobook if you can get your hands on it, because it is fantastically done, and really adds to the atmosphere. So Carla is about a group of friends, young teenagers in a small tourist town in Ireland, and they, you know, grow up together, and do kind of stupid stuff together, and then you know from the start that one of them, Carla, goes missing, and the investigation never really goes anywhere, and nothing is found out about where she went or what happened to her. You then follow 3 of these friends about 15, I think, years later, when they're all grown up, and either still living or back in the town for various reasons. At this time, a body is found on a building site in the town. So you switch between both the perspectives of 3 of these friends, and also between their adult present timeline and then their memories of what happened when they were like 15. So this book is a thriller, but it is very slow, very character focused and very tense, and the atmosphere of this tiny town, all its secrets and its like facades, the different relationships that everyone has with each other, and how those relationships change over time, is all so brilliantly done. I couldn't stop listening to this. I needed to know what happened. Very highly recommend the audiobook, but generally it's just a great, exciting, scary, sad read. Good time. And then lastly, I read Yellowface by R F Kuang, which was the book I think I was most disappointed by of the ones that I read last month, because this book has been so hyped, obviously, and there's there's not many books that are gonna live up to that kind of expectation. I wasn't necessarily expecting it to. I was like, I know this has probably been overhyped and over talked about, but I still was like about it, you know. I was like, meh. So Yellowface, it's about a woman called June Hayward who is a sort of failed-ish writer, in that her debut novel kind of, well, was a bit of a flop, and she can't really find the inspiration to write anything new. What she does do is spend a lot of time feeling very jealous of her friend Athena Liu, who is a very, very successful writer. And then Athena dies suddenly and accidentally, and June is the only person there to witness it, and she takes Athena's manuscript that Athena had just finished and had told nobody about, because she's very secretive about her writing process, and June decides to publish it under her own name. So the point of Yellowface is a kind of like critique of the publishing industry and an exploration of like who can tell what stories and online culture, all that kind of thing. And some of it was interesting. I think there are like some interesting thoughts in there, but none of them were really explored very fully. There's a lot of time spent on different Twitter storms and internet scandals, and I didn't really care about any of it, like any of that side. Like, it was a lot of like there was nothing really interesting said about any of that, apart from like people on the internet are shitty sometimes, and, you know, often pile on somebody because they have nothing better to do. I just feel like a lot more could have been done with it, and that a lot of the time the author kind of doesn't really trust her readers to understand what she's doing, and so some bits kind of feel a bit heavy-handed because of that. But it's fine. I don't dislike it. It was just like a book. So that's all the books that I read in July. It was a pretty good month, like I said, and I enjoyed myself. If you've read any of these, let me know what you thought of them, and you know, if you read anything absolutely banging in July or recently, please tell me. I need to know. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you very soon.